Hi, I'm Rune Guidance of the Norse, and welcome to this teaching video about crystals and stones that were used for ancient healing during and before the Viking Age period in Scandinavia. Now, if you are wanting references for sagas or eddas that would tell you what parts we get some of these stone names from, and how do we really know that that stone was used during that time, and how can you prove that they even used it for healing or even for magical purposes, that is another video. I will be doing another video where I go through and I actually list items that we found in grave burials, where those burials come from, and how we kind of devise to and come to the conclusion that these stones were used in a certain way. This video is much more generalized and still very useful, so I'm sure you're going to appreciate it and I'm sure you're going to like it. So enough of me babbling, let me get started. First of all, as I just previously mentioned, grave burials are some of the most fantastic ways that we learn about anything from any culture, because that is what really matters to people. What people take in their graves, what others around them who cared for them place in their graves, shows what was really important to those individuals. And especially when you're coming from the mindset that possibly you will be needing these same types of tools once you cross over to the other side, that's even more important to see what was in people's graves. So many of these stones were found in graves. The second way that I derived or came up with choosing some of these stones was by the geology of the countries of the Scandinavians and countries that they settled, even if they weren't part of the Scandinavian peninsula. So because they were commonplace and found in the geography of where they were, we can assume that they were used because of what we find in history of people using what they had around them. We also know that ancient Scandinavians, and even during the Viking period, and even post-Viking period for a while, the Scandinavians were animistic, and many of them still are. I'm one of them. Even though I was born in America, I am an American Scandinavian, raised in a first-generation Swedish household, and traveled back and forth working in Sweden many, many times. But what I'm saying about that is we still have a huge animistic community, even a pagan community, even a Norse pagan community, even though all three of those things are not necessarily one and the same, for sure. And when you have an animistic point of view, or a worldview, which is what animism is, it is the idea that spirits live in every living thing. As a matter of fact, even when we come to rocks and minerals, we find that, and even science sometimes categorizes stones and crystals into certain species. For instance, we're going to talk a little bit about jasper tonight, and that was found in Viking graves and even was spoken about. And there's so many different types of jaspers. There are different species of jasper, and I think that's really cool, because when you think about a species, you think about an animal. Well, maybe rocks have a different form of intelligence. They may not have the same parts of the soul that we all possess as humans, and maybe animals have even less parts of the soul, since they communicate in a different way. Maybe they have even more parts of the soul than we have as humans. Likewise, plants, animals, rocks, they might all have a different combination too. Parts of the soul, Norse parts of the soul, that's a whole nother video as well. So stay tuned and I'll eventually get to that as well. So back to our rocks and minerals that we are pretty sure the Viking Age Scandinavians used. Now, I'm going to start with one that I just mentioned, and there's a reason for it, and that is jasper. Jasper, I'm going to show you about jasper, and I'm not going to get into all the scientific names for jasper, but jasper is an opaque stone. It's kind of like, it's a chalcedony, which is something that has chansoyancy, I'm saying it wrong, something that has that beautiful shine to it like an agate and almost like a cloud where you can kind of see through it. Well, it is a form of that, but it's totally opaque. There is nothing transparent about it. So this, for instance, is what we like to call calligraphy jasper, because it almost looks like handwriting in the makeup of it. It almost looks like Arabic type of writing, which is so beautiful and very different and has a special type of flair. That is what is in this. Sometimes people call it a calligraphy stone, sometimes people just call it yellow jasper. Jasper can also be something like this beautiful mookaite, which is a type of jasper that's only found in Australia. But look how very different they are. And even this, ocean jasper, really, really cool, really neat, but found in the waters of Madagascar, something totally different. But they're all jaspers, and there are reasons, the way the silicate is and all that type of stuff, scientifically, why they're classified as that. But we know that jasper beads have been found in Viking burials. We know this. And because the Vikings had such a wide spread of traveling and trading, they really had access to quite a bit of minerals that weren't just only found in the Scandinavian peninsula. So this first one, I'm going to tell you what traditionally and in folklore the properties of jasper in general are. Now, as I said, mookaite jasper, all these different Kumbaba jasper, which actually technically really isn't a jasper, all these different types of jaspers have their own flavor to them, which give them what we call in the metaphysical community, which some of you might laugh at, healing properties or spiritual support systems. But I tell you what, this is ancient as time, because even in the pouches of the deceased, in every culture, in graves, you find little stones, little things that had nothing to do with being a tool, nothing to do with any type of maybe practical application, but they were there, and we deduce for magical purposes or for spiritual purposes, maybe a talisman for protection, etc. This is what our people, humanity, because we're all connected and we all go back to the same thing, has believed in for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So jasper has, in the folklore, an extreme nurturing ability. Jasper is known as the great nurturer, the most perfect nurturer, the ultimate nurturer. And I think that's kind of interesting, especially since if we're talking about the Viking period and the Viking Age, that's not a nurturing time. As a matter of fact, a lot of Scandinavians aren't really proud of that time period. That was an extremely violent period for Scandinavians, and they kind of outgrew that and moved away from that. Maybe that is one of the reasons why they were attracted to jasper. Maybe it made them feel that nurturing energy, and they longed for that, because since it was such a violent time, who knows? So that is the first one that we're talking about. Second of all, I'm going to mention, and we know this because we have found this in many beads in burials, as well as mention of in historical senses written about that they have seen Vikings with these types of beads that they traded for carnelian. And carnelian, why it's different than just a jasper is because it does have some of those transparent areas in it where you can almost see in, and then you see more layers of red, more layers of red. But carnelian was typically used for, traditionally in folklore, now I'm not saying the Vikings used it for this, the Vikings were attracted to things because of the way they looked. Maybe some of them felt this energy, so this is what's in the folklore, not necessarily what the Vikings used it for. For blood flow and for the circulation around the body and through a healing aspect. So if you're wanting more circulation, if you're wanting that type of blood to reach certain parts of your limbs or certain wounds to heal them, traditionally, that is the folklore that surrounds carnelian. It's also believed to aid in skin lesions and skin type of stuff too. So we do know that Viking Age Scandinavia did have access to carnelian and did often use it. Okay, next we've got the garnet. Garnet, and also in particular almandine garnet. Now on the shores of Norway, the rocky beaches of Norway, almandine garnet just kind of washes up on the shore. You can go there at any time and just look through the rocks and pick them up and take them home. But garnet was very much a stone of balance. We know that this is like a sacral chakra stone. It's also a root chakra stone. For those of you who adhere to more of that Asian way of approaching crystals, but in the north they didn't have that, and they just were attracted to it and felt that it was very grounding and solidifying. We see this everywhere in burials and in jewelry and in beads. And let me show you. As a matter of fact, these are some glass bead replicas that were found in the graves in the burial mounds of Birka, the island in Sweden, which Birka was a huge trading center. And it was in the Baltic Sea off the coast of Sweden, and they really had their own economy, their own everything, and it was a huge stopover place. So these are actual replicas that came from there, and what they would do is take these semi-precious gems, or they considered them precious gems, I'm sure, and also forming glass and other things, which we'll get to, and created beads, and they were worn not just by women but by men. Oftentimes women had the large brooches to keep their pinafores on, and then they would string together layers of beads to connect them. So jewelry, making jewelry out of crystals and stone was huge business for the Vikings. Now they primarily traded in silver. That was their go-to of choice, even more than gold. They really liked silver. Gold was a little too soft for them, and they like to bang things around a lot. But also creating jewelry out of these types of materials was very, very important to them. Next thing I want to talk about, this is just a large, and I have lots of samples of this, and this is a real rough piece because I'm trying to kind of show you. Obviously they wouldn't have found jasper most likely carved like a point like that. They would find things in this raw, rough type of material, and this actually is a form of smoky quartz. Smoky quartz was used obsessively by the Druids over in Great Britain and in Ireland. The Druids were very much attached to smoky quartz. They believed smoky quartz, they used it as a protective talisman for spiritual protection. They also believed that it was used in their rituals and that type of thing. Whenever something is really popular and considered more of a sacred object for another culture, the Vikings kind of liked that as well. So where this may not have necessarily been around them all the time, they certainly, we know, even historically, the Danelaw and all the things that happened in Great Britain, and with the discovering of Dublin in Ireland was a city founded by the Vikings. We know that the Vikings were there, put down roots there, didn't just trade there, stayed there and lived for hundreds of years. So mixing into the society, which is why people have that ancestry in them even to this day. So we're quite sure that they probably came across this, and of course, I'm sure, would have been attracted to it as well. Okay, next on my list is Icelandic spar. Now, many of you have heard about this. Icelandic spar is what we call optical calcite, and it is double refracted. So, and there's a couple of, I don't want to say they're conflicting, but I'm also going to mention iolite with the Icelandic spar, and I'll tell you why in a second. Icelandic spar has a way to double refract the light so that on a cloudy day, you are still able to see a shadow of what's behind the clouds. So we know that the Vikings navigated by the stars, by the sun, and by the moon. And what do you do if you're in the middle of the Atlantic and you're trying to book on over to Greenland or someplace and it's just cloudy for a week straight? How do you navigate? What do? You can't see stars, you can't see the sun, you can't see the moon. Well, Icelandic spar has a way of, when you're holding it up and you're looking, you can still see the outline or the shadow of the moon. You still can follow it. It's not clear like you're seeing the moon, but you're seeing an outline of the shadow from the double refraction. So Icelandic spar has been found in later shipwrecks. And before that, we find iolite. Now, iolite also has this, and I can see it because the light is shining in, so it's almost transparent. As I'm looking through, parts of it are transparent. Iolite is this purplish navy. It's also called water sapphire. Water sapphire is another name for iolite because of the color and the wateriness of it. This could be almost shaved or sliced, cut in a way, chopped in a way where you could get a thinner type of strip of it in a more clear, transparent part. And they believed that that also was something that they would look through for navigation. Now, ocular calcite or Icelandic spar and iolite, both in a spiritual sense, are used to help find your way, to help find direction. This is part of the folklore that has been passed down because it most likely was used literally for that, and therefore carries over into the spiritual realm. You know, most of our folk practices start as a literal expression of something in the physical realm, and then we also add a spiritual meaning to it, and vice versa. Everything is layered because we are made up of more than one part. We're not just physical beings, we are spiritual beings as well. That's how a lot of folklore works as well. So things are double meaninged and double layered in that they have a literal meaning and a figurative meaning. So iolite and Icelandic spar, both. Now let's look at amber. Amber, I'm gonna say, if I can find where my little piece is. Where are you, Amber? My chunk of amber. It's right here in front of me. Why didn't you guys say something? Okay, our chunk of amber. We know that amber really isn't a stone. It is basically it's a fossilized. I wrote down exactly what I want to say. Fossilized resin. Why I can't get resin out of my head or into my head. It's a fossilized resin or sap, tree sap, right? That is from thousands of years ago, and it hardens and fossilizes into feels like rock. Now, the thing about amber is it comes in all different shades of browns and yellows and golds, and with different strengths of opacity. And some of you remember from Jurassic Park that, you know, it can trap things inside of it as well, which is always fun and neat and kind of interesting. But out of all the stones or crystals or minerals that we find in sagas, in history for the Scandinavians and the Viking period in particular, amber is their go-to. Amber is their number one thing. Even so much as the goddess Freya wanting to wear her necklace, her beautiful necklace of amber that she needed from from the dwarves, and it goes on and on and on. We have found so many amber beads, amber carvings, pieces of amber in everybody's bag, in everybody's grave, in everybody's burial. We just know it was huge. And they actually called it the Amber Highway. The Baltic is where we get the amber from these ancient forests that actually have sunk and became part of the Baltic Sea. And that road, or the river roads, you know, the Vikings were the river kings. They would take their boats and travel. They would use amber to trade with. Trade for amber and trade with amber to get the things that they wanted. And so amber is a huge, 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 really, we know for sure, used by the Vikings. The thing about amber, and we think that this is probably part of why it was so attractive to them, is it is known because, and I want to make sure I say the right thing, succinic acid, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but succinic acid is found in amber, and it is known as anti-inflammatory properties. So that's why people even sometimes will have necklaces on children that are teething, which I am not recommending that. That can be very controversial, and so absolutely don't say, oh, well, I saw this lady say about that, and da 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 da. I'm just telling you, historically they did this, and babies would chew on these or suck on these amber necklaces, and that succinic acid would reduce the inflammation and then helps take the pain away. And that goes for any of the things that we talk about from an emotional perspective of healing, a physical perspective of healing. Nothing should replace what your doctor has to say, what your medical professionals have to say. I'm just telling you the folklore behind the crystals and what people like to use them for and have used them for in the past. But you have to do you in the way that you need to do it, and so you never want to replace anything from a professional if you're already getting care from someone. So it actually is a thing, and some people feel that even using amber on parts of arthritis, parts of injury, actually heals and calms the inflammation. Amber was ground up in ancient times. Another thing, just because ancient ones ground it up and put things on their eyes or ingested them, don't you do it, because they can actually be toxic. I'm letting you know this is something that they did. They would grind amber up and they would consume it, and they believed that it reduced inflammation. And maybe it did for some people. Obviously, we do have that acid in it that does cause that, so you know it's quite compelling and quite interesting. Okay, next we have thulite. Thulite is a stone that is indigenous to Norway. Yes, it's also known as a rosalina, and it's pink and beautiful and rosy, and it's said to bring joy and happiness to those that work with it, those that hold it. And of course, if you were in Norway and this stone was, you had easy access to it, people would use it. It's only common sense. Now, we don't necessarily find it in certain sources saying that it was used, but it is an indigenous stone to Norway, and therefore we're very sure that if it was out and about and around, people used it. It's also kind of nice for carving. It kind of has that soapstone feel to it, and making little figurines or little pendants or things that would be totems of protection. So only found pretty much in Norway. As time goes on, we find minerals in other places as well, but this is where it's known from, coming from. And why it's called thulite is because the Scandinavian peninsula was thought to be an island years and years and years ago, and a mystical, magical island with magical people on it. And it was called the island of Thule in mythos and in stories that people would talk about. And so because this stone is indigenous to that area, they decided to call it thulite. Now, here's one that's indigenous to Sweden, and that is, where's my other baby? Here we go, trolleite. And trolleite, yes, the magic of the trolls. Actually, the man who first officially discovered it, his last name was Troll, but why was his last name Troll? Anyway, this is really, really beautiful. It's has a very calming energy to it. It can be very, very pretty, like turquoisey and different shades of blue. It's kind of waxy looking, which is neat, as you can see. And this was only found in Sweden for a long, long time. However, in recent years, pockets of it have opened up in other parts of the world. It's not quite the same, though. You can see, even over in the Middle East, some of it has come from there. And yeah, I just don't think it has that same richness and beautiful look to the Swedish trolleite, but it still is powerful and it still is beautiful. It's also believed to help you connect with your energies on the other side, those who guide you, ancestors, loved ones that have passed. Really, really awesome stone. I love trolleite. I'm a huge proponent of collecting trolleite if you can. Used to be super expensive, really expensive. I mean, I think this piece, God, I don't even remember what I paid for it, but this piece itself, I mean, it was under $100, but yeah, now you can get parts from other countries in the world. You can get trolleite from other places of the world, and it's much more affordable because of the supply and demand. That doesn't mean it's less powerful. I feel a difference, but I've been working with it for a long time. You may get blown away because you have a piece from some other place. So don't rule it out. But I would just ask out of curiosity where it comes from. All right, I'm gonna give you another one. Lapis. Lapis is incredible. Now, lapis, we know a lot of it has come from the mines in Afghanistan and the Middle East, and not in Scandinavia. However, especially when the explorers of Scandinavia made their way down to the Mediterranean and the Black Sea, they most likely probably would have come across lapis beads, lapis stones that they could make into something, and they most certainly would have been attracted to it. So it is very possible that, especially since it was really prized as a royalty stone, Cleopatra was known for having all her palace walls paneled in lapis. They would grind it and use it in eye makeup and all kinds of things. And why this was such a big thing, especially for the Egyptians, is they believed it led the soul into immortality. Immortality. So having a lot of lapis on you, especially in your burial or in your tomb, in your pyramid or whatever, that was going to help you move on to the other side with immortality. They also believed that it was a heart opener as well, aiding the wearer or the holder of such to have their heart energies open, and a certain amount of wisdom and regalness that would accompany them for that, which is why it was used for royalty. Royalty really wanted to, this is our stone. Okay, in general, we know quartz is everywhere. Quartz is all over the world. Quartz is beautiful, and of course, ancient ones would use quartz. We know, I mean, just Google, folks. I could go on and on and on about the properties of quartz in general and what it does, from communication, from being in our computers and in our phones, to helping navigate all kinds of energies. The list goes on and on and on and on of the scientific proven facts about quartz. So the ancient ones definitely would have seen quartz and been like, oh my God, this is amazing. Let me tell you, I had a piece in my car once on the floor, a big one, And I was talking to someone in my car. It was on the floor, and I had my window down, and the sun was coming in, and all of a sudden smoke started coming up in my car because it refracted the light of the sun and pinpointed it onto a spot and actually started to burn the floor in my car, the paper that it was on. And so I thought that was super, super interesting. So, you know, people were not dumb back in the day. They figured out what these things were used for, how they benefited them, how they amplified other stones and increased the energy that they were looking for in other aspects of their life. Okay. Something that also, a couple of stones that probably would have been more familiar to those in Scandinavia, even though they might not have had opal mines themselves or other mines, it would be opal. This is a beautiful specimen of lavender opal. And I do believe there is actually even a reference about how opal was used to cure eye ailments. And it's kind of gruesome how they came up with that type of thing, but they believed opal was something that was very rare because it was for them. I mean, a lot of opal comes from Africa and Australia. Those would have been very far away places for them, although we do know Vikings made it down to northern Africa anyway. But because of trading, things could have been traded from other parts of the world, and then when the Vikings came down to trade, say around the Black Sea or something, they very well could have come across some of these other more rare stones for them. But it is lore that opal does help with eye infirmities. Just saying, that is the lore. Also, bouncing back, I know I'm kind of bouncing around here, but before I forget, there's another stone that is just, that I should have mentioned already, that is just local to Norway, and that is larvikite. And that's because it's found in the larvikite fort on the, would be the eastern coast of down in Norway. And this is a larvikite skull. I've been trying to show you different types of shapes, like the Trolleite Merkaba, different points, that type of thing. Here's a skull that is carved out of larvikite. Here's a point that is carved out of larvikite. Now you can see really well in this point. See that choyancy? See that reflective type of glossiness? It has that in it. And part of what larvikite is really good for is grounding and protection. People feel that it is something that aids with the connection of ancestors, but also grounds you and protects you. And another one that does that would be obsidian, and they most certainly would have had obsidian. I mean, we know obsidian forms from the rapid cooling of volcanic lava flow. It cools very rapidly, and that top layer is where we get obsidian glass from, which is why it's found all over the place, especially in islands. And Iceland is a big, huge island. Now this is mahogany obsidian because it also has brown connected to it. But you'll see it's like ridges that almost make it look like it's I don't know, artificial, the way, but that's that flow of the lava and healing really, really quick. Iceland being just a bunch of volcanoes, they would have certainly run across obsidian. This one is, and I don't know if you can see, you can. This is golden obsidian. It has a golden sheen to it. Obsidian, I have cut myself many times, deeply, with obsidian. Obsidian was even used in the South America or Mexico. The Mexica people used some of their tools, cutting tools made out of obsidian. It's very much used for spearheads and that type of thing, but also known as something that is incredibly grounding and incredibly protective. Now, a couple more stones, and then one more thing, and then we're going to finish up, because I know I've been yakking at you for a while. Things like amethyst, which the Greeks believed aided with drunkenness, to prevent drunkenness. If you plopped a little amethyst stone in your wine, you wouldn't get drunk, they believed. Or now we say, oh, it helps with addiction and that type of thing. The Vikings were down in the Mediterranean a lot. They most certainly probably would have come across that. And another thing would be, oh my God, I hope I can lift this one up. I collect labradorite, and I absolutely love it. This is labradorite, and this is more of what we would call a spectrolite piece. Now, I used to think, and this is what we were told kind of in the beginning, was that the difference between labradorite and spectrolite was that spectrolite had more purple in it. It's actually not the case. The case has to do with the base that this shimmery material is on. It's much more opaque in labradorite, whereas in spectrolite it's more transparent, so you get more of the buoyancy all throughout the stone. Another thing is spectrolite is found in Finland. So where labradorite, where sure, obviously that's in North America, it can be found in other places, because spectrolite and labradorite were not actually even named those names until I think the 17 or 1800s. But ancient people knew about them long before that. Spectrolite being only found in Finland, very, very special. And the story, the Inuit people have a story, and also the Scandinavians have a story, and they both are kind of combined. The Inuit story about labradorite is that the northern lights were trapped in there, and one of their gods, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, hit the earth with a spear, and that's what caused the northern lights to be trapped into the stone and break it up and into pieces, so people could have that amazing piece. Very similar with spectrolite, same thing. They believe that the northern lights in Scandinavia and Finland, they believe that they are, and even the indigenous people, the Sami people of those regions as well, believe that it represents a bridge to the other side. In Norse tradition specifically, that would be Bifrost Bridge. That's what carries you over, and that is trapped into the spectrolite piece. So still the northern lights on the other side of the world. Really, really beautiful. One of my all-time favorite pieces. I collect this as well, and probably the piece I have the most of. And if any of you have seen my altars or anything like that, you see that I collect labradorite. Why? Why do I do it? Because it's amazing and beautiful, but not just because of that. Labradorite has a really, it's known to be a protector, to help you connect with psychic energies and getting messages from the other side, but also protecting you from psychic energy, which is kind of cool. So not only are you connecting, but it's helping, making sure that you're going to connect with the right things, the things that are useful to you, the things that are going to be to your benefit and not be more parasitic on you. So a lot of times if you go see a card reader or that type of thing, they might have a big hunk of labradorite next to them, or a tower next to them, because it helps with that type of psychic energy. Okay, last thing I want to say, and we're wrapping it up, is this. To the Viking Age peoples, the pre-Viking Age peoples, and up until the Middle Ages, and actually after, for sure, but what they didn't really differentiate too much between what in America we call ugly stones and beautiful stones. Of course, the more beautiful the stone, that catches someone's eye. But there were other things that Viking Age people used to connect to, and that were everywhere. This is an ammolite. Ammolite has so many properties to it. It's a fossil of a living creature. One of the things is wisdom and knowledge. Now, they would have seen this as just something that is very sacred in magic. So this, things, shells like this, even regular seashells, might be used to put burnt offerings in, might be used to be one of their tools, might be used to feel that they could connect maybe the Norse god Ran, who was the god of the sea, or things like that. And even this is a petrified whale vertebrae. And obviously the sides of it have broken off before it was collected for me. My daughter actually got this for me, digging and found it. We get all that type of stuff in Florida. This thing is so freaking heavy, and when you think about this, was swimming around the ocean. Do you believe it? That's so bizarre to me. It's like, I love you so much. Tell me all your secrets. Give me all your wisdom, please. Things like this, just like it's really important for us woo-woo type of people or us spiritual practitioners to find stuff like that and go, oh my God, this is amazing. Don't you think they did the same thing? Absolutely. So even though this might not be attractive or this might be more common, they were just as important to those people at those times as something glittery and amazing like this juicy amethyst. You know what I mean? So I hope that this gave you a little bit of insight, a little bit of wisdom. I will, for my patrons, be creating a video with the sourcing in sagas and eddas and burials about things that were actually found in the graves during Viking times, specific types of stones. That will be a Patreon video, so you have to join my Patreon over on Patreon, runeguidance.com if you're interested. We have all kinds of fun things over there. I'm always posting stuff and talking and having a good chitty chatty time. So there will be one specifically geared toward that, but this was to give you guys a generalized idea of some of the stones that were found in Scandinavia, which most likely were used, and some that we definitely know were used in the creation of jewelry, tools, etc. So thank you for listening. This video will be in 2 parts. I hope you get to watch them both, and just message me. I'm on social media. Everything is runeguidance.com or Rune Guidance of the Norse. Any of those, you can find me anywhere. Even on that new thing, Thread, right now. I don't know. I deleted my Twitter account a long time ago, so I guess that's the replacement for that. Love to talk to you. Ask me any questions, especially if you message me on TikTok or Instagram. That's going to probably be your best way to get a hold of me. But in the meantime, enjoy your day and keep learning and honor the ancestors. Take care. Talk soon.